Well, what's the drawback and the problem with Google cars? Now, actually, I know there's some obvious things about computer malfunction, and also what happens if you have a blowout or something in the road that's a hazard that just happens to fall there. A tree, something that a tree. Well, say a box falls off a truck, that's the type of thing, or whatever. There's an accident up ahead. Will it be able to react fast enough? Now, I think the concept is okay in some ways, but I know what they're getting at. It's to probably alleviate a lot of short trip driving, and I know the major media actually presented their rationale on one major drawback to Google cars, but I could think of several, to tell you the truth. Well, I think a lot of it takes the fun out of driving. I think that's going to be one of the main things. But and I'm using this is like right off of Wikipedia, Google Shopping Express, as a demonstration. But the thing is, actually what's going on too is a lot more people are shopping online and they're having their goods delivered to them versus even driving someplace. So where this concept of Google cars might come about is in major retail transportation or trucking. That's where I think the concept's going to come about. I'm actually not going to, rehash something that's in the major media. I'm bringing out my own original thoughts. I think this concept is actually going to come about, is going to be very strong in trucking because it's fairly expensive to pay a driver. You also have to monitor a driver with GPS to see where they're at. And, as an individual, the shopping, a lot more shopping is being done online. You might even have where drones are delivering goods to your house via drone, here's your pizza, whatever, or coming directly from eBay, Amazon, or one of your Google affiliated vendors or whatever. But for an individual to have this, I think the concept actually is going to come about more in maybe, could be public transportation, but I see the dangers in that. But I also think trucking might be one of the big things because, if there's some designated lanes or areas that can be set aside on the interstate highways for trucking, and then basically it almost makes it like a railway, railway on the roads, where you can have part of it where the driver can sleep, set whatever the Google to do its thing, and just drive along. I think it's actually going to wind up being a hybrid system. But really, the big obvious drawback to Google cars, I knew this anyway. This was on the major media. It's snow. What do you do with snow, man? It's like, hey, we got 8.5 feet of snow here in Buffalo. I'm going to get my Google car and just program it to go someplace. Yeah, that's sure. That'll happen. But any amount of patch of ice or anything on the road, forget about it. You need a lot of driver input. Even your ABS system doesn't work right. Like if you know about driving in snow, which I haven't done in a while, but actually if you are going up a hill and you're slipping and sliding, you have the computerized ABS traction control system, right? You're working with your brakes. You're better off turning that damn thing off and letting your tires just spin a little bit and dig and throw the snow, and you'll actually get more go power in the right direction, believe it or not. A lot of times with traction control off, you're doing better. So snow throws a whole monkey wrench in the deal. And actually, if you're looking at about half the USA, or maybe even more. And if you're actually looking at other weather conditions, even in the Midwest, in the West, you got things that could be blowing across the road like tumbleweeds and stuff. You might see something out there on the right-hand side. It's like the computer's not going to react fast enough. And, if you have snow, you can also make a Google Cars that's a tracked vehicle. How's that? Well, there you go. We can go anywhere. But then again, if there's something, how would you, if you got snowbanks, how would the sensors work? Would the sensors ice over? And if there's a malfunction of your Google car and it was a tracked vehicle, it could be plowing through about 10 different houses before it ever stops. So there's a lot of problems with this technology, but I think it's actually going to come into play with trucking convoys, where you're probably not going to eliminate the driver, but you know how the drivers gets tired and they got to sleep. They can only drive so many miles in a day, and one of the problems is they don't get enough rest. Well, if you have a car that, a truck that's a Google truck, and maybe the speed is reduced greatly, maybe it's in a special lane, you got to do it in special designated areas or something. But even if the speed is dropped down to 50 miles an hour, it's in special designated areas, and does it for several hundred miles. That's enough to rest that driver up, and he went several hundred miles more. So it's probably going to be a hybrid system. But there's so many other factors. Like even in the South, you get these ice storms every once in a while. I mean, Google Car is going to say, hey, we got to down power lines. Did you download your latest update on the weather fast enough? Did your uplink tell you what the road hazards are? So you're going along with your Google Cars, and the roof hits one of these, the top of the roof hits one of these down power lines and shorts out the entire electronic system. I'm not knocking the idea all the way, but you don't want to jump too far on this deal too fast. It's like it's going to wind up being piecemeal. That's how it's going to work. I think for the private individual, it's probably going to take a hell of a lot longer than for the trucking industry, because as it is, they're paying a lot of money for to track people where they are on the road as it is. They already have systems to do this because they want to make sure the drivers aren't going to different places or to hijacking a high cargo or whatever the hell they're doing or taking unauthorized stops or whatever the hell they are. They already pay a lot of money for this stuff as it is, but they'll probably make it'll be economical for a dedicated trucker to probably have this system in the truck where they can turn it on sometimes for several hours or maybe a few hours or even an hour to get them a little sleep or something. And they're that much further down the road, so it saves time. It might probably work in that situation. But I guess you'd have to have designated Google trucking lanes for that. And it's probably worked better like when you're crossing more open expanses of territory. It's probably not going to be very good around in New York, New Jersey, L.A., Boston, Washington, D.C., or even Dallas, Atlanta areas. But, when you're crossing across large expanses of territory in the United States, there's a lot of open land where, open stretches of interstate where it probably could work. But yeah, the big problem is snow. Man, if you get like several feet of snow, hang up Google Cars or even Google Trucks. It's not going to work out. And then you also got to worry about those icy or snowy curves. Because, here's the input for the steering wheel, and you go straight right off the freaking cliff. Google Cars is trying to self-correct. What's going on then, man? So basically, it's something for smooth sailing type driving. That's really what it is. It probably will change eventually. I guess when they have flying cars, then you could probably have it. Actually, what I think is going to come about is there's going to be a lot more drone technology to transport retail goods to places. It might be that versus trucking, but even that, it's like how much can you airlift, right? I think this technology is actually going to be a hybrid in the trucking industry. It's not going to be something where maybe someday, I don't really know what could happen 100 years from now or even 50 years from now, but the first place that's really going to embrace this is the trucking industry. I mean, if you're going along and you got this vast, hundreds and hundreds of miles of straight open roadway, and you got to go from one side of the country to the other side, yeah, you might, and there's no weather hazards or anything like that. Maybe you could turn on your Google Cars, interface, and it's like a souped-up cruise control that's doing the steering, the driving, and everything for you. And then, yeah, it could work in that situation. But I think as applied to the individual, it's got an extremely long way to go. And, the thing is, as an individual, with a trucker, trucking is work. Maybe you somewhat enjoy your work and stuff, but, you want to get to the destination. A lot of people drive cars for pleasure, and they don't really necessarily know where they want to go. Sometimes on the weekends they'll go, if you're in the snow, you're not going to go too far, but it's like, and even if they're shopping. A lot of people are doing shopping online. So, and you also got the problem with the parking and all that stuff. But I think it does. I think it is. I think the technology is going to do well in the trucking industry. It's just I don't think it's going to happen in the personal industry that quickly. Not at all. Not at all. Not at all. But I think the technology is going to take off very well in the trucking industry. It's going to be better if you got to have a driver. But if the driver can get 3 more hours of sleep, and get down the road another 150 miles because he's got a Google Cars interface, quote unquote, well, that could be well worth it. They already have lots of equipment on these trucks as it is. I mean, they got GPS, they got monitoring, they got cruise control. The rigs are, hundreds of thousands of dollars, whatever the hell they are when they're brand new. I mean, all this stuff costs them a lot of money as it is. And, time is money. In the case of an individual, I don't think it's going to matter that much. The one thing that could probably alleviate long distance driving would be the train. But the problem is these train cars, these car trains, whatever the hell you want to call them, they're to put your car on there. It's more of a hassle than it's worth, and from my experience, in my opinion. And I think if the technology was put into the railroad industry, where people could just drive a car onto a railroad and piggyback and go 1,000 miles, and it's not costing them more than the gasoline cost, and it's not taking them twice as much time and stuff. I think that would be the way to go, because in other words, a train can actually, you could start getting trains up to I know they go a couple hundred miles an hour or more, but say you had a train going 120 miles an hour, and you wanted to go from LA to New York, and 2,000 miles of that trip was along the 110 miles an hour. So that it was an 18-hour trips, or a little over 18 hours, where you weighed most of the way across the United States. Well, that would be the way. That would be the way. That would be the real time saver. But I think for the trucking industry, I think this technology is going to really come about. Indirectly, it's going to help retail and shopping. But, as an individual, individuals are actually starting to just go online and buy things and have it delivered by professional drivers, right? Now, UPS might be benefit by this technology because, I know they use planes, but, they use trucks too. I mean, for maybe the end delivery might not be the best deal, but a lot of the driving where you're going across hours and hours and hours and it's very boring, well, that could be damn well a lot safer with Google Cars because driver fatigue, using this technology. I think it's actually going to come of its own in the truck industry more than anything. But as far as individuals, they actually do far more complex things. They're not actually doing the same thing all the time with the car. And a lot of times when they're driving to work, they're driving through a lot of heavy traffic when unexpected circumstances are happening all the time. And if you're going to make a long trip, it might make sense. But, I think it would be better to use the train. And, even if there was a problem with snow, if you had your car aboard a train, it would be much safer. But the problem is they have not got that down where it's simple to get on the car train and take the car train. Oh, it's freaking hassle and a half, man. You better off driving. But it'd probably be better to go along those lines because, but actually, we can actually have 200-mile-an-hour trains that are carrying cars. And if you got to go 2,000, if you're making so you're making a 2,500-mile trip and 2,000 miles of it is at 200 miles an hour. That's 10 hours. And you could be sleeping too. Wow. Now that would be the deal, and you don't have to worry about the snow, and you don't have to worry about, changing the tracks on the tread thing or digging up the road because you're using a, armored tank or something. Imagine the gas mileage on this thing. Yeah, this would be an ideal Google cars in the wintertime, but we're not going that way. We're not going in that direction, man. I'm sure it would plow through any kind of snow if you had a Google cars with one of these tracked vehicles, but that ain't the way it's going to work. But you know what happens though with new technology? A lot of times it doesn't really come out and into fruition the way it was planned. It doesn't mean the idea was bad. It's like one thing leads to another. Serendipity. You just didn't really think it would turn out that way, and that's probably how it's going to happen with Google technology. Technology is actually great. I just don't think it's going to come out as they're thinking it's going to come out. I think it's actually going to come out more with the overland trucking and maybe some of the mass transportation, but not so much the individual just yet. Not just yet.